So, Jeppe High School for girls in Gauteng has suspended its controversial hair policy, following backlash over claims of it being anti-black. The decision comes after several black pupils were suspended for having braids that did not match the natural hair color. This move follows students' request for amendments to the policy, which had seen some pupils sent to the library and barred from class until they altered their hairstyles. For more on this and concerns around it that have been raised around the school's hair policies, we are now joined by Tessa Dooms, who's a director at Rivonia Circle. Tessa, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Before we deal with the question around the hair policy, let's start off with hair itself. Why is hair such an emotive topic?
Well, hair is emotive because it has been used as a marker for discrimination. And we have a history of that. What we know about racism is that racism is essentially taking physical features and turning them into reasons to discriminate against people or think that people are lesser than or inferior than. And so if you think about our history, a very stark example of that is the apartheid classification system, where we would subject people to something like a pencil test to see if a pencil could stay in their hair or come out of their hair. Because if it came out of their hair, that means that their hair was closer to being straight and closer to whiteness, and therefore would give them advantages in society. That's why hair is emotive, because it's been used as a marker or as a symbol for whether you are better or worse as a human being.
Yeah, and what we've seen also, Tessa, is even within the communities, cultural groups that do face some of this discrimination because of their hair, is that even within those communities as well, there is some level of discrimination. If, for instance, they look at the texture of your hair, this is a question that you explore as well in your book that you penned with Lindsay, The Colored, How Classification Became Culture. Speak to us about then how hair then becomes controversial even within a community that faces discrimination from, let's say, for instance, a white community.
Well, part of the programming of something like apartheid or about racial systems is that it then internalizes your own sense of whether you are better or worse as a person who is being discriminated against, right? So within black communities, it now creates this competition about who is closer to whiteness, because that will then give you more benefit in a society that prioritizes white features, white ways of life, white cultural practices. And it had real import, and in some ways still has real import, when you are able to approximate to what it means to look or feel like a white person and assimilate into that kind of culture. Because, for example, if your hair was straighter, you may get a better working opportunity. You may be able to work at the front of the shop rather than the back of the shop, because you are seen as more presentable because of your proximity to whiteness. And so it creates this inner competition amongst communities around scarce resources that have been created through an unfair system of discrimination, about something that we can do very little about, which is our appearance. And our appearance being created into this value system now, of there are some people where when they look this way, they are more valuable than other people. And we translated that into our own communities because we are competing for scarce resources.
Yeah, and then when it comes to a document such as a hair policy, who should have a say in that? Because outside of the school environment, there are communities, and of course those communities form part of, let's say, for instance, the school governing body that will inform, what the hair policy of the school would be. And amongst those people in the community, you'd find people like, as an example, like Ayu Masikela, that also has an opinion on the type of hair that the African women wear.
Yeah, the first question we need to ask is, why do we have hair policies? What does the state of my hair got to do with the education in my mind? It just doesn't. For me, I think we haven't answered the question about what are we trying to do when we tell people what to do with their hair. What is the outcome that we are seeking? If it's that we are seeking conformity and we're trying to teach children to conform, yet we say we are a society that wants to celebrate diversity. Those are two contradicting ethics. where you say we want to show that we can be diverse and different and still accept each other, but as a school, we need to make sure everybody conforms. I think that we haven't thought about what we're trying to accomplish. But then if you also look at the history of these things, hair, clothing, all of those things that schools are trying to invade draconian ways, trying to control, are in many ways culturally diverse as well, right? So we're talking about the hair policy. Firstly, if you think about hair policies, they're usually about saying what is beautiful or what is respectful is hair that goes down, hair that can be tied up, hair that can go down. Yet my hair naturally grows up, which means that a girl whose hair grows down, number one, already has an advantage to be seen as beautiful or respectable. And a girl whose hair grows up like mine is now going to have to work twice as hard, not only to start hating my hair for putting me under the pressure of having to work so hard, but now also having to aspire to somebody else's hair. And I think that there's a problem, is an inherent problem in that. If you think about the braids and the hair color issue, even for girls who are white, for any girl, for any boy, what has the color of my hair got to do with anything? I don't understand. In the world after school, people color their hair all the time and are successful in life. What is the color of my hair got to do with the content of my mind? And in a cultural sense as well, we know that in our communities, in Black communities in general, braids have become just culturally normative. And I don't mean this in a kind of historical culture. I mean it in popular culture. It's culturally normative to have braids, and it's culturally normative to have them in different styles. Shoma Josie does it. Shoma Josie is a very successful person, a very smart person. She has colored braids. It does not change the content of her character. And that's the thing that we should be focusing on in schools, the content of people's character rather than their appearance.
Yeah, and that again speaks to the parents, because they are part of the school governing bodies that would inform some of the policies of the school, including the hair policies. I was having a conversation earlier on with Naledi, and I was saying that if you think about it, about 20 years ago, Naledi would have been in school dealing with issues relating to hair. Fast forward 20 years later, somebody who has a child who is in school, their children are facing the similar problems and stigmatization that they were facing when they were in school.
Yeah, I think school policies need to adjust and also evolve, right, with the cultural context in which these schools are operating in. What these hair policies, clothing policies, all of it is trying to do, they will tell you they're trying to prepare these young people for the world. They're trying to prepare them to be successful in the world. Their definition of success in the world is still limited to corporate companies who will judge you as you walk into the room on whether you speak the right kind of English, whether you look like them, whether you present like them in terms of hair, in terms of clothing. And that's a problem with those corporates. Those corporates are in themselves problematic, but there's a bigger world than corporate South Africa now. Yeah. There's a bigger world outside of South Africa that could be great places for these young people to go and express themselves, work, find expression in society. There's a creative sector. There's all sorts of spaces now where you can go and fit in as you are. And we should be encouraging young people to see themselves in this broader version of what success looks like, rather than success being limited to this very particular corporate culture that we think that success looks like. That, and even when you think about other kinds of professions, if you think about doctors or lawyers, all of these normative things that we've been taught, what it means to be a doctor in 2024, in terms of how you present, is different from what it used to mean 10 and 20 years ago. And I think we must all start interrogating that and stop treating children like they are preparing for 1950.
Yeah, so much has changed since then, and I'm thinking back now to my time in school. Around about 2004, 2005, you had songs like India Ari's I'm Not My Hair, and this issue is still there?
Yeah, the issue is still there because we're not addressing it. I keep saying that people ask, why do we still use apartheid classification terms? Why do we still use these terms in our law?